All right, class, here we are on chapter 9 of Python 1, and this week we are going to do some really fun and exciting stuff in the world of graphical user interfaces. And in Python, we use the name of the class, the module that is used to create GUIs would be tkinter. And so let's let's delve into this very long chapter that has a lot of information on it. I don't expect you to know everything that's in the chapter, but what I'm going to try to cover is the majority of the things that I think that you will find that you will need to know. So let's get started. So anytime that we want to use a graphical interface, we've used Turtle in the past, but now we want to use tkinter. And the way to get access to the tkinter classes is to use this little bit of code at the very beginning of your program. From tkinter import asterisk, and the asterisk means that you're importing every bit of the tkinter class. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create, whenever we're creating a user interface, is we need a window. Because if we're going to do graphical user interfaces, we need windows. And so we just declare a new window object called new window equals tk and then our parentheses. And we know that the parentheses are utilized in order to, the tk parentheses, basically that says just create a new window of this particular class. Okay. And then we want to start placing stuff onto, we want to create objects that will go within this brand new window. And so, for example, we can have labels, and labels very simply are text objects that we put onto into a window. And so what we want to do is create a new label widget in the new window object. So we say label, and this is just the object name equals label, and then we have some parameters for the label object. First, the first bit of code is the name of the window that we're going to put it in. We've declared a window called new window, okay? And the text of that label is very simply, welcome to Python, okay? So that's the first widget that we're going to place on. And then we have a second widget that we want to place on called a button, and you've seen buttons all the time. As a matter of fact, you see this right here at the very bottom of my screen. That's a button. So button equals, and button is the formal name of this particular class, and we're going to call it. We're going to place it in the new window, and then the text that goes on the button is click me. Okay. So all we've done at this point is we've created a new window, and then we've created a label object and a button object. Now, if we were to run this without these two things, all we would get would be a brand new blank window, because what we have to do is we have to place the object onto the window, and later we'll find out a little bit about how we actually place those items on. But just for now, for simplicity's sake, all you need to know is that we use the pack method in order to place that brand new object. So label.pack with the parentheses puts it onto the new window object, and then button.pack places the new button object. And now finally, at the end of any time that we create a brand new tkinter instance, is we want to basically create an event loop that will continue to process until we decide to close the new window, okay? And so basically using this new window or window.main loop will keep that particular window open until we decide to close it. So let's run this and see what it looks like. And this is what has come out up here. So I'm going to drag my shell over here. So you see that we've created a brand new window. It's basically very, very small. But you can see that the default name is TK, and so here we have our Welcome to Python label, and then we have a button called Click Me, and we can click it to our heart's content, but it's not really doing anything because typically what you do is you attach commands or event handlers to widgets, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at least for now, very simply, that is very basic introduction to how to start creating user interfaces. Let's go a little bit further now, and let's look at this example that your book talks about called process button event. And in Python, just as we saw in our very simple GUI program, it's, we want to be able to process actions. When we click on a button, we want to do something, right? We want to be able to have it do things. And so this is an example of a program that says from Tkinter import all. Then we have a couple of functions, okay, that we're going to define. And the very first function is process OK. And whenever this function is called, it's going to print out the OK button was clicked. And when the process cancel button, or when the cancel button is clicked, it's going to print out the cancel button was clicked to the console. And so then we create a brand new window, and then we create a button called BTOK equals button, and then there are several different interesting parameters that we can use. And the very first one is the name of the window that we put it in, and that corresponds with this named window here. The text that's on the button is going to be next, so text equals OK. And then FG stands for foreground, so that means that's what the color of the text is going to be. And then the command, in other words, what's going to happen whenever you click on that button? Well, what's going to happen is it's going to run the process OK function. Okay. And then we create a button called BT cancel. And again, it's opening up in our window. The text is equal to cancel, and it says BG equals yellow. And basically, what that means is that the background of the button is going to be yellow. And then the command, or what happens, the event that happens whenever we click on the BT cancel button, is it's going to run the process cancel function, which is going to print out the cancel button was clicked. Okay. And then we want to pack it onto the window for the OK button, and then we pack the cancel button onto the user interface, and then we just do window.main loop to keep it running. So let's see what happens whenever we run this. All right, so here we have our code that is in action, and so we have, just like we said, we have a little button called OK with a red foreground, and a button called cancel with a yellow background. And let's see what happens now that we've attached commands that go with with each button. So when we click OK, it should fire off the define process, the function process OK. And it is true. That's correct. Whenever we clicked OK, we see over here that the OK button was clicked, and I can click this a million times. Okay, every time I click it, it fires off that little event handler. And then if I press the cancel button, it says the cancel button was clicked. Now, this is a very rudimentary type of event handler, but you can see that if you put some executable code into this function, then you can do some really, really powerful things. So kind of keep that in mind. You can use buttons in order to do a lot of things and handle a lot of events. So that's good. So that's one thing. So another thing that you can do, which is probably more handy, is putting your graphical user interface windows into an actual class. And there are two reasons that you might want to do this. Number one is that by putting your code into a class, you can reuse this code in the future. Okay, so it's all condensed, and you can reuse this. You can just pull this out and use it in any other program that you ever need it for. Okay, so that's really, really handy. Number two is by defining all functions as methods, it allows us to have access to data fields in the class. Okay, so for example, in this particular class, this should look very familiar. The class process button event. Okay, so we've defined a brand new class here, and these are the fields. Window equals TK, BTOK equals, and then we've seen this text before. BT cancel equals with the yellow background, and then our methods within the class are BTOK.pack, BTcancel.pack, and window.mainLoop. And then we've got two functions. Whenever we click on when we click on the OK button, it's going to run self.processOK, just like we would in our normal classes. And so it takes that click as an input, and it'll print out to the console that the OK button was clicked, and then the same thing for the cancel button. And then to make it all run, we just call the process button event method. So let's run this and see what it looks like. And here you can see we have the exact same thing as we had before. Whenever I click the OK button, it just does the same thing. The beauty of it, though, is that by putting it in a class, and you probably need to do this anytime that we do a graphical user interface, you can just grab this code out and pull it anywhere else, and you can use it. So putting it into a class is very, very, very handy. Now we've done a little bit with buttons so far. Let's look at all the different widgets, or at least a good percentage of the widgets that we might use in Python. So in Tkinter, we have several different types of widget classes. We've already talked about buttons, which is simple buttons to execute a command, and you've seen most of these, if not all of them, whenever you're using computers. But we have this thing called a canvas widget class, and it's used to draw graphs and plots. We also have a thing called a check button, which is actually a checkbox that toggles between two values, either on or off. We have entry, which is very simply a text entry field. And then we have what's called a frame, which is a container for other widgets. So you might have, for example, you might have a button, and you might have a check button and an entry field within a frame. Basically what it is a container within a window. And then we have labels, which display text or image in a window or in a frame. Then we have the menu widget class, which basically allows us to create a menu pane that's used to implement pull down or pop up windows. We'll talk about that later. And then we have the menu button class, which is a menu button for menus. And then we have messages which pop up, which can display text. We'll talk about those later on in the lecture. We have radio buttons, which set variables to a specific value and clears all other radio buttons. So it's you might have multiple buttons, but you can only select one at a time. And then we have the text class widget, which is used for formatted text display. And there are a lot, in your textbook, you just take a look, but there are a lot of things that we can do to format text, text with fonts and bold and italics, that sort of thing. And so make certain that you look at your book for that. And we're not going to cover a lot of that right here, but what we want to do is look at a demo that's in your book and walk through it, just so that we can kind of see a lot of the different types of widgets and how we might possibly use them. And so in this program, we're going to use all of these different kinds of widgets. And it's not a very functional program, but at least it's a demo so you can see. So we begin this program that imports the Tkinter class. Then we create a class called widgets demo. And inside that, we want to define what the the different objects and methods within the class. Okay. So the first thing we do is we create a new window object. And then we have, this is new to us, window.title is widget is equal to the text widgets demo. And the idea behind this is this is the title bar in any window. And so what you do is with the window.title method is it allows you to specify text, specific text, or it might actually even be dynamic text that allows you to put in a title in the title bar of your brand new window for your program. And then we create a brand new frame, which is called frame 1. And again, a frame is a container that gets put into a window. And inside that frame, you can put different types of of objects or widgets. Okay, so we declare a new frame object called frame1 that goes in the window object, and then frame1.pack. And when we do frame1.pack, that simply just puts that frame1 into the window. And then we declare a brand new integer variable called v1. So self.v1, and self refers to the current object or the current window. Dot v1 it's declared as an integer variable. And then we create a check button called CBT bold. And basically what it is, it's a check button that we place. The parent container is frame1 that we just created here. The text on it equals bold, and then the variable that it refers to is self.v1. And so we'll come back to this in a minute, but that variable basically allows us to assign a value to that particular variable. Okay, and then finally, the command, or what we want to do when we click that button, is we want to use the process check button method, which we'll define down here and we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay. And then we have another variable that we declared that's of type integer called self.v2. And in self.v2, we want to create two radio buttons, okay? RB red and RB yellow. And RB red is a radio button that gets put inside frame1. The text on that button is red. The background of it is red. The variable is equal to self.v2, okay, which is that integer variable that we just created, and the value equals to 1, and so that's the number that it is in this particular frame. And then we say RB yellow equals another radio button. Frame1, text equals yellow, the background equals yellow. Variable is the same as our first radio button, self equals v2, but the value is equal to 2. And then again, the command for that is self.process radio button. We'll talk about this method called in just a little bit, so kind of keep that in mind. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to place these three widgets onto our frame. And so we say CBT bold. So up to now, we've in order to, whenever we place items onto our GUI, what we've done is we've used the pack command. But there are multiple ways that your book talks about that allow you to place items onto your user interface, and using the grid layout allows you to have a little more control over where you put items onto your graphical user interface. And so, but basically what we say, what we're doing is we're saying CBT bold, put it on a grid, and the parameters for that grid is that we want to put it in the first row and first column of that grid. And then we want to add CB red to the grid. We'll put it in the first row and the second column, and then RB yellow dot grid, put it in the first row and the third column. Okay. So for now, let me see if I can comment this out without getting everything, without screwing everything up. Let's try this. All right. And so then down here at the bottom, at the end of this code, we say window.main loop. Then we have whenever we click on, when we check the check button here, it's going to call the self.process check button. Okay. And so if the value, if it becomes checked, it's going to print out. If it gets checked, then, or clicked on, it says the check button is checked if self.v1.get equals 1. otherwise it's unchecked. Okay, so the idea behind this is that if the value of V1 is 1, then it's checked. If it's 0, then it's unchecked. Okay, so whenever we click on an item in that radio button, or I'm sorry, in that check button, it will it'll print out whether it is checked in or unchecked. And let me try to run this and see. Not certain if we'll get a bug here or not, but let's try it and see what happens. Yeah, we want to save it. All right, so here we are. We have our very basic little thing here, our basic little program, our widgets demo. And whenever I click on bold, because it's checked, the value of V1 is equal to 1, and so it is checked. But whenever I deselect it, the value of that widget becomes 0, and the check button is unchecked. Okay, so I can turn it on and turn it off, and what that allows me to do is if I check it, then that Boolean when it's checked, we could create some sort of command or at least set some sort of variable value if it is checked. Okay. Then we have another radio. We have our 2 radio buttons, the red and yellow, and it says if self.v2.get equals to 1, then it's red. Otherwise, it's yellow. Okay, and then we concatenate that with is selected. So whenever we click red, it says red is selected because self.v2.get equals to 1. If I click yellow, then yellow is selected. Okay, so we can kind of go back and forth, and no matter what is selected, then that prints that out to the console. And obviously printing out to the console isn't very helpful to us, and so what you would probably want to do in a real program is you would want to have some more meaningful code here whenever you clicked on a widget. Okay. Let's look at the rest of this program. I'm going to uncomment it, and we'll take a look at it. All right. So after all of this, we create a second frame, and then we, instead of using a grid layout, we just pack it onto the frame. Okay. We pack the frame onto the window, and then we create a label that we add to frame 2, and the text is enter your name. And then we declare a string variable called self.name. And then we create a text variable that is called entry name. Okay, entry name equals entry, which is a widget, a type of widget, like something that we can enter our enter data into, and so we're going to put it in frame 2, and then the text variable is self.name, okay, or the string variable that gets placed in there. And so then we create a button called bt get name equals to button. We're going to place it in frame 2. The text that gets placed on this button is get name, and the command whenever we click on that button is self.process button. Okay. So then let's go down to this process button, and we can see that it says your name is, and then self.name.get. So this is a getter that we have for self.name, which basically is it's going to print out the value for self.name, which is the string variable that we enter. So the button basically grabs the name, and by running self.process button, which is going to be the name that is placed in the entry item. Okay. And then from here we have a message box that basically will pop up, and and we'll see that in a minute. But it allows us to have a little pop-up text that says this is a widgets demo. We'll see that in a minute. And then we add our items in grid fashion to frame 2. label.grid, row 1, column 1, entry name.grid, row 1, column 2, get name.grid, row 1, column 3, and then message.grid, row 1, column 4. So let's run this and see what it looks like. All right, so now we have our full widgets demo, and so we could, we can do is we can enter our name here, okay? And then when we click on get name, what's going to happen is it's going to print out, it's going to fire out our process button here and print it out to the console that, my name is Brian. So I click on that, and yes, that's true. So that it runs there. We also kind of see another thing that we didn't talk about yet is having a text window, and we can create a text window to put text into by using the text widget, and we're adding it to the window, and then we pack it onto our user interface, and then we use text.insert, and then we just basically put our different text lines onto it, and it puts it into our widgets demo. All right. So that's our widgets demo. Let's continue on and look at some other things that your book talks about. We also have the ability to create some graphics, and for that we use the Canvas widget. And so we use the Canvas widget to display shapes onto a graphical interface. And typically for Canvas widgets, we use the grid layout to place items onto a virtual grid. And just something else that your book talks about whenever we're putting widgets onto a user interface, and I'm going to talk about this. The best way probably to do this is in Excel. And we know in Excel we have kind of think of things in a grid. So we can do say for example we have say we're creating a spreadsheet here, and we want to do say why don't we do this? Creating a small movie database, and so let's say that maybe movie 1 is Star Wars, movie 2 is Lord of the Rings, and maybe movie 3 is let's say another movie would be Captain America. Okay, and let's create another So what we have here is just a very basic database within an Excel spreadsheet, and we'll think of it like this. I'm just going to put all borders and think about it as a grid, okay? And so what you can do in Excel is you can do spans, because this we want this to stand out a little bit more, and maybe we want it a different color, and maybe we want it all. Let's see. Maybe we want it in a different font. What we want to do is also just to kind of expand that. We can use the merge and center, basically, so that it spans both of those rows. Okay. And maybe movie 3 also has another title called, just say for example, it might be called Return of the King, whatever. And so in that we might want 3 to expand 2 rows, and so in that what we do is we would merge that. So what we're doing is we are spanning rows here. Here we're spanning columns. Well, you can do the same thing with Decanter by doing the row span, and you can use the column span, just so you know that you can use that. Okay. In Python, your book also talks about 3 different layout types that we have. The first is the grid manager. We've talked about that. We've talked about the pack manager, and we also have the place manager, which your book talks about. Place manager gives us, we can place things in terms of pixels, and it's very exact and much less dynamic. And it really kind of depends on the type of program that you're writing to utilize the best type of layout. But, you know, at least for us, we're going to mostly just talk about the grid manager, the pack manager. So let's talk a little bit about using the Canvas widget. So we have our import statement here, and then we have a class called Canvas Demo. We create our default constructor here, create a new window. The window title is going to be Canvas Demo. And then we create a new Canvas object, okay? So self.canvas equals canvas, it is placed in the window, called window, and then the width is 200, height is 100, and the background of it is white. And then we want to put it onto our user interface. Then we create a brand new frame called frame equals frame window, and then we'll pack that frame onto it. And then we want to create a button called button BT rectangle equals button. The text is rectangle, and when we run that button, it runs the command display rect. So it's going to call this particular method when we do it. And then we also have another button called BT clear that whenever we click on it, it's going to use the clear canvas thing. So when we click on BT rectangle, it's going to call this method, and then it's going to run this code. So self.canvas.create rectangle, and then we have basically we have the four different parameters that are dimensions of this particular rectangle, and then the tag of it is called RECT. Okay, and then clearing it, the canvas, whenever we click on the clear button, it's going to basically delete this item RECT. All right, let's run it and see what it looks like. So it creates a brand new window here, and if we click on the rectangle, what it should do is it should draw a brand new rectangle using the dimensions that we talked about. Then when we clear it, it runs the little delete clear canvas method to do that and delete. And in Canvas, you have not only rectangles, but you also have ovals, you have circles, triangles, you know, just about anything that you need to be able to run these programs. You can fill them, you can change the foreground color, the background color, and so just kind of check out your book, and that will help you to kind of see a lot of the different things that you can do with Canvas in creating user interfaces. Okay. We can also add images, and so we have the photo image class to add only a GIF. In Python, we can only add GIFs, and we use the create image method in order to display an image in Canvas. And so in this new class called image demo, we've created a new window, added the title, and then we have a brand new photo image object called VHImage, and it points to an image that I have in a folder called image. So it's just traversing through the same file structure that is that my Python program is in, and it's looking for a file called vhlogo.gif in the image folder. And so, and then I create a frame called frame2, place it within window, pack the frame, and then add a label. Frame2 image equals vhimage.pack, and then we say canvas equals canvas.frame2. So basically we're putting a new canvas object into frame2, and we say the width of that is 400 and the height is 100, and when we run it, we see something really cool. So we can see when we run this, we have now officially placed the Van Halen logo inside this particular image in GIF format. And that what that does is now we have used Canvas to bring, or I'm sorry, we've used the photo image class to bring a photo into a program. So pretty cool. So you can use it to, especially if you're a graphic artist, you can bring your own artistic creations into. Next thing we want to talk about is menu items, and menu items are pretty, they're a little more advanced, but what they allow us to do is they allow us to create, you can see like in this particular program, we have several different items, okay? And so what this allows us to do is to create pull down menus using the menu bar or the menu class. And so what we do here, create a new window, we create a new menu object called menu bar equals menu, and let's put it into the window object. And then we say window.config, the menu equals this menu bar object that we just created, okay? And so for this brand new menu, we need a couple of pull down menus. So first we want to create a menu called file menu, and so the file menu equals the menu equals menu, and it's added to this menu bar object that we just created. Tear off equals 0, and then we want to add some cascading options, okay? And so the label for this particular idea is called operations, and then the menu that it belongs to is the file menu. We create 3 brand new menu items called new, open, and save. They don't really do anything because there's no command there, but just so you know, that's the basic syntax for adding menu buttons or menu items. And then we want to create an exit menu, and we add it. We want to add a cascading menu item. Label equals exit, and whenever we click on it, it's going to add this this quit label. And then when we click on quit, we have a little command which is window.destroy, and window.destroy will close the current window. Okay, and then we want to place a frame within the window, and we want to put that frame 1 into a grid. Let's see what happens whenever we run it. So you can see here we have a brand new window called menu demo. We've got 2 new items here, 2 new menu items. One's called operations, one's called exit. To click on operations, we see we have new, open, or save. And if we put a command to any of these, then it would run that particular thing, but right now they're dummies, so they don't really do anything. We do, however, have one for the exit button, and if we were to click quit, then what it would do is it would quit the program. And so I'll do that right now, and you can see that it exited the program. So your book goes into some pretty good detail on menu, but this is a very basic, down and dirty way for you to understand how they work. Now, the last type of Tkinter piece that we want to talk about is dialog boxes, and there are lots of different types of dialog boxes that we've talked about. For these, you actually don't want to import the entire Tkinter class, but you want to import Tkinter.messageBox, or if you're wanting to do simple dialog boxes, you would import Tkinter.SimpleDialog or color chooser. If we were using that, which we don't in this, that's just another option that we have. Okay, so we have several different types in Tkinter, different types of message box. We have one. We have informational messages, which is a messagebox.showInfo, and then we have messagebox.showWarning, and then messagebox.showError. And let's just run these so we can see them one at a time. Okay, and so we can see right now we just started, and right now we're on this piece of code right here that popped up. Show info is the title here, and the text inside it is that this is an informational message, and it's informational because you can see the blue informational dot, and by using the show info method, that's what caused this type of message box. Now we want to do show warning, so we'll click OK, and it goes on, and we can see that this is a warning box. And if we want to do what show error looks like, this is an error, and you notice, you might hear in the background in Windows, when I click on these, it pulls out the Windows audio for that. And then we also have different types of a message box. So we create one that is called is yes, and basically it's a message box called ask yes or no. And so whenever that gets run, we can basically ask the user if they want to continue. What we would do in a if we click on is yes, well, everything went back to net. You can see that whenever I clicked on is yes, that it prints out true. Okay. Okay. So we've got that piece of it. Let me pull up my dialog box. All right. So we've got that, and then I think I may just want to. All right, we'll continue on with this. So next, the next type is where we want to ask if folks to enter their name. And so we could type our name in here. And basically we've created a brand new string variable called name. And so whatever we enter into this is going to enter in, the user's that string, whatever the user types into that, and we're storing it into a string, and we can print out whenever we click OK, it'll print out to the console what was given there. Okay, and then finally we can ask for an integer, and so we use the tkinter.simple dialog.ask integer, and we're going to store it into a brand new integer called age, variable called age, and we can type into there, and so I am 51, and so I'll click on 51, and whenever I click onto that, it'll print that out to the console. Okay, so you can use all kinds of different dialog boxes to query the user. Are you sure? No, continue, that sort of thing. Your book goes into a lot more detail on these, but at least this is everything that you kind of need to know for this week. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'm glad to help. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.